Hi, welcome. We're going to talk today about finding Tadasana and the importance of neutral. So when you're teaching and working with your students, it's really important to set that foundation for them because Tadasana is really the blueprint for every asana. And it's important to always start assessing neutral from the bottom to the top. So that means starting from the feet and working yourself to the head. I often see instructors only coming around and adjusting their arms or their head, and really the issue starts with how their feet are positioned, and then their pelvis, their rib cage, shoulder girdle, and head. So I really want to encourage you when we work through this, and then you go out and teach your students to always make good eye-to-foot contact. So first things first, when you're on your yoga mat, you're going to line up the outer edges of the feet with the outer edges of the mat. So that means that you're not just going, oh, my toes are forward. You're actually looking at the point behind the pinky toe all the way to the outside of the heel. Now, some people will say, well, Hope, my foot is really wide by the toes. Well, that's great. That means better balance for you. But that doesn't change the fact that we still need to align the outer line of our foot with the outer edge of the mat or the edge of the room or whatever it is that's a straight line for you on right and left sides. Now, once you've done that, for a lot of people, what they notice is then, well, now my legs are rotated funny. So most people then make that solution by turning their legs out, but their feet turn out as well. So if Lainey turns around, what we're looking for is that the pits of the knees, that means those vertical slits on the backs of the knees are pointing straight back, up and down. So once Lainey's readjusted her feet again to a neutral position, she's going to kick her heels out. Perfect. How she stands normally is going to be kind of her default position for her body. So once we've adjusted the footing, we have to, in fact, change the position of the femur head in the hip socket without changing the position of the foot itself. Now, long story short, this is a really easy fix, but we're going to kind of break it down. So if Lainey stays grounded through the ball of her foot, especially behind the pinky or behind the big toe, and then thinks about way up in her hip socket, you can use her hands for help, rolls her thighs externally, keep your toes down, now roll your thighs again, which you can tell it's a lot easier said than done. Perfect. We're going to try to the best of her ability to get her knee pits to point straight back. Now, she spent 30 plus years of her life walking in a certain pattern with certain body language, so this is not a quick fix. Your students are going to say, I don't get it. They're going to say, this is hard. Guess what? Change is hard. So just continue to reintroduce this to them over and over and over again. As you do this, you can turn back around, Lane. As you work with this lower body adjustment, what ends up happening then is you're going to eliminate the whole, I have flat feet, I have high arches. We all have bottoms of the feet. And most of the time, if we have a flat foot or an overly high arch, it can have a lot to do with the rotation of the femur in the hip socket. So as Lainey changes that rotation, you also feel more contraction in your glutes. Well, now her booty's going to turn on. So instead of telling your students, now squeeze your buttocks, you don't even have to do that anymore when you put their body in the right position. So again, outer edges of the feet line up with the outer edges of the mat. This means you don't have to worry if you have a bunion or a hammer toe or whatever else. Keeping your feet plugged in, rotating the legs, most likely externally, so the back pits of the knees point straight back. When your students are at home, encourage them to use a mirror for this. You can buddy up quickly in class and have people just take a peek if this is their first time. But what we're trying to do then is so that the leg sits perfectly in the pelvis the way it's supposed to. Some people will use the knee, they'll say, turn your knee straight forward. And that really is not the greatest directional cue that you can give someone because the kneecap or the patella is a floating bone. It's held in space by the quad and different connective tissue. It's not actually a structural bone. So it's not a great directional tool either. Okay, so we've established the feet, we've established the leg position with that glute activation. So if people have a flat booty, guess what? They're probably not standing the right way that they're supposed to be. So instant contraction. Great. Now we're going to look at the pelvis. So when we're looking at the pelvis, we're looking at our hip bones. which a lot of times are up by where the top of our pants are. ASIS, so anterior, superior, iliac spine, and the pubis bone. These three bony landmarks, not the flesh around them, these three bony landmarks line up parallel with the wall you're facing. So this may mean, if Lainey turns sideways, that she may go from a dumped belly to what feels like being tucked, when in reality it's just neutral. So just be mindful, if you're doing something different than you've always done, it may feel like an extreme adjustment. All right, so Lainey's going to turn forward again. When we sit in pelvic neutral, we are bringing back the natural curve of our spine, the curve that we were born with. This is an essential piece to our neutral or our mountain pose puzzle. All right, the next one, and this is a big one, is ribcage neutral. So underneath the chest line is the bottom part of your ribs, and they kind of come up, almost like butterfly wings, to your xiphoid process or your sternum. These two landmarks are absolutely essential. What happens for many people, and I see it a lot in yoga, is they're told to lift their arms overhead, and with that, their whole chest lifts as well. So you actually haven't lifted your arms overhead, you've merely tipped your rib cage in order to lift your arms. And so then you can bring your arms back down. This happens a lot for people if they have shoulder restrictions or issues, if they have hypermobility, or just lack of body awareness in general. And even yogis have this. So this is really important. This is setting the foundation for every pose that you'll ever do. Okay? So Lainey has foot neutral, leg neutral, pelvic neutral. Now she's going to work on an exhale to bring that rib cage down and together. Work in progress. Because again, remember, if you've taught your body your entire life to be protruded out, we're going to have to slowly coax it back. This will also eliminate, for a lot of people, any sort of back pain or hip flexor pain. Protruded rib cage is often linked to a tight psoas, as is pain in the lower back and the bottom of the rib cage. All right, so once Lainey has that rib cage down and in place, if I turn her sideways again, don't worry about her lower body, we're looking up here right now. What she'll notice is when she brings her rib cage down like she's supposed to, and she's doing a great job, notice how her shoulders now round forward. Now, we got to give Lainey a little credit. She has 3 kids, and she's currently nursing one of them. So that whole hunched forward is kind of not totally her fault. So, but you can see how we're told by so many people, bring your shoulders back. And what do? We pinch. So we overcorrect, and we push the chest out, which is probably one of the worst things we can do for ourselves. Military posture, we want to bring the rib cage down so that we don't end up pinching in the upper back. So when I bring that rib cage down, like Lainey's done so nicely, and then I activate the upper portion of my back or between my shoulder blades, it's not at the cost of my front rectus muscle, that rectus abdominis muscle. If this is overstretched, this tends to be over tight. We no longer have the support we need in our body. So if Lainey now lifts her arms overhead, but before she does it, instead of going wide arms overhead, she's going to stay within the line of her body. She's going to bend and extend her arms overhead. No. Just stay standing tall. I just want you to do your arms. So she's just going to bend and extend just her arms. She doesn't know everything I'm going to do ahead of time, so. As she does that, she's lifting her arms, keeping her rib cage down and anchored. Your shoulder girdle is only as healthy and stable as what sits below it. It's like the roof of a house. You expect your roof to be stable, you have to have a good foundation, you have to have good framing in order to have a good roof. And so now bring your arms down again. So when you're encouraging your students to lift their arms overhead, a slightly more effective way to lift your arms, not saying that wide arms is bad, but if we're trying to retrain people that maybe have misguided bodies, this bend and extend, combing your hands through your hair, keeping the rib cage down, you may get more of a stretch than what you've had before, but you're also going to feel more solid. Like Lainey's core right now is really turned on without having to suck it in or really try to overexert herself. That's what we're looking for. So let's have Lainey turn back forward and let's quick review. So when we're talking our students through, we want outer edges of the feet parallel with the outer edges of the mat. Don't worry about what the feet do. Externally rotate the thighs and look at your feet lift. Keep the ball of the foot anchored. You should feel your glutes contract. Pelvis is neutral. Hip bones, pelvis bone, parallel with the front wall. If you're on your back, it's parallel with the ceiling. Front rib cage relaxes down. This may take a little bit of work. And then finally, as I feel my upper back contract and bring itself together, it's not at the expense of opening the shutter doors on the front of my body called the rib cage. And then finally, where does that head go? It's going to be slightly pulled back so that the chin is level with the floor. So much of our technology nowadays is pulling ourselves forward, and we're losing the cervical curvature in the neck. Now, the spine is curved for a very particular reason. That S curve in the spine is meant to absorb shock, so that when we jump or run or do anything like that, it's going to help, like a pogo stick, absorb the shock and absorb the pressure. If we take away our curves in our body and straighten our spine, this is why I don't tell students to straighten their spine or have a flat back, we lose the integrity of this amazing part of the body called the spine. All right, so practice your Tadasana, practice it on friends and family, and I know that your students are going to benefit from these new cues and tips. Namaste.